I'm Robin Scott at Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City with the Encore Grant panel. And we're going to discuss today how to teach developmental students and especially the demographics of developmental students, who these students are, where they've come from, what their backgrounds are, and how we can help move them forward. Today on our panel, we have Sherry Alexander from Rose State College. She is the developmental specialist with the Empower program. We have Linda Robinette from Oklahoma City Community College. She is the coordinator of developmental language arts. We have Jennifer Pointer from Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City. She is the department head for developmental studies. And Vicki Ashby from Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City, who is the lead instructor of reading and writing. Together, these women have 100 years of teaching, and most of that has been with developmental students. So we are in good hands today as these ladies talk about developmental students. All right, Linda, let me start with you. What are the demographics of the people who take developmental classes? What are their backgrounds, their challenges? Where do they come from?
I think they come from all walks of life. Definitely a developmental student can come from any place. But what I see in my experience, most of my students, I would say, are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and I'm not saying they have to be, but I see that a lot. I see minority students. Recently at our college, we had a presentation on our Achieving the Dream status, and I heard a statistic that 54% of our students were white, and I thought, oh, that's not in my classes. I would say 20% might be white. So lower socioeconomic background, minority students, students with learning disabilities lots of times, or developmental students. So those are some of the areas that I see, but they can come from any place. Just students who have been to high schools that don't do a good job of preparing students for college sometimes. But that in general, that's where I see them from.
Vicki, help us with this. Demographics of developmental students, what have you noticed?
Well, I actually did a survey of a couple of my classes almost a month ago. This was a beginning developmental writing class. It was about the 12th week of the semester. And over 2 classes, I came up with some interesting statistics. If you take a typical row of 6 developmental students, well, first I would say about 80% of my students graduated from high school just last year. And yet here they are in a developmental setting. But if you go back to that 6-person row, 2 of them grew up without English as the first language. It's not their primary language. 1 of them will not have a computer at home or any kind of computer access at home. 1 of them is married already. 1 of them, typically a different one of them, is a single parent. If you take the whole class, there are about half as many children being brought up by those people as there are students in the class. Now 1 person typically is going to have anywhere from 4 to 6 children. Most of the parents have just 1. But children are a significant factor in their lives as to whether they can come to class, as to whether they have had breakfast that morning. I sometimes have students who've come and have said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm grouchy, I just didn't have anything to eat this morning. One semester, my record is 3 separate sets of single mothers with 4 children, not in the same class, but during the same semester of 5 classes. Our typical student works more than 20 hours a week, and many of them work more than 40 hours a week because they are supporting families. In short, I guess I should say they have a lot of other things on their plates besides coming to school. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to give them the most effective and efficient experience we can when they come.
Sherry,
I
in the
agree.
Empower program?
Absolutely, that would be true with us. My students are sent to us from the Department of Human Services rather than just the total demographics of what would be on campus, but all of that would be true, except I do run quite a gamut from like a 19-year-old to a 50-year-old. Not as many just graduating from high school, but all of that would be true. Also, those challenges, one of the huge challenge, childcare would be one, because a lot of them are single parents. Actually, everybody in my classroom would be. And transportation is a huge problem. It's altogether different sending my 18 or 19-year-old to a campus where they're going to live in the dorm and they just go to classes than someone that has to constantly have transportation that really isn't very reliable. And now they're having to try to get to campus and to get to work, as you mentioned, a big characteristic of that population.
Jennifer, what else would you include there with demographics?
Well, we touched a little bit on the older student. The day classes don't necessarily, which is what Vicki and I are teaching right now, don't necessarily have as many of the older students, but I've taught night classes for years here, and our night classes are filled with more of the returning student. Many of them have been working all day long, and I co-taught a class the other night at 5:30, and that was the first class that many of those students would take for the night. They would go on to take an 8 o'clock class afterward and be on our campus till almost 11 at night, after maybe getting up at 5:30 in the morning or working through the night before. So going back to that idea, I think full circle, of the full plate. If this is the developmental student's plate, here it is full with family, financial issues, difficulties maybe with parents not bringing them to school after promising to bring them to school. Their plate is very full comparatively to the average university student.
All right, Vicki, from your experience or your research, what factors are associated with positive outcomes for these students?
Well, there are 3 things that I've noticed that help my students to be successful, and the first is life motivation. The second is good organizational skills, and the third is confidence in their own abilities. Life motivation. I can have a student willing to sit up till 1 in the morning to do homework if this is a person who has been dreaming of coming to school for years and is finally getting to fulfill that dream. Not much is going to keep that student away. Now that they've finally taken the plunge, they're going to see to it. The other big motivation that I see in my students is that of the parent who perhaps didn't value education before the child or children came along, but now they want to be a good example. They want to provide a better living for their children. I remember one student I met before classes ever began, and he expressed how nervous he was about coming to school because he hadn't been to school for 30 years. But he had a 4-year-old son, and he wanted to show that son that men go to school. And when he set the curve on the midterm exam, he took a picture of that 100 with his cell phone and sent it off to, I don't know who he sent it to, but he was beaming. You know, and that was his motivation. It was a tremendous life motivation. They all come for different reasons, but they have to carry the motivation within themselves. Whatever kept them from learning before isn't keeping them from learning now. Now they've let themselves loose to learn. The second one is good organizational skills. As you say, very full life for a developmental student in many cases. They've got to be able to study when they have to study. They've got to change the diapers, make the dinner, go to the job, and study for algebra. I'm not sure I could have done that, but they do somehow. They're wonders of organization, the ones that many of those who are quite successful. And the third thing, which in many ways is, I want to say it's almost more important, because I see this one causing people to drop out. It's confidence in their own skills, confidence in the student's own ability to learn. Computer confidence is a huge factor. I lost a student last week. She was one of those who had dreamed of going to school for years, but she doesn't know enough about computers to be comfortable using it. And we said, come in, we'll give you training, we'll help you. And she just couldn't do it. Maybe she'll be back. But those three things, life motivation, the ability to organize a very full life, and confidence in one's own skills, and to the extent that they don't bring all of those when they come in, we have to help them develop them.
Jennifer, what would you say about factors that help positive outcomes?
Well, I can piggyback a little bit on what Vicki's saying, and there's something that stuck with me that I heard a long time ago in the adjunct office, and it was, we cannot want this for our students more than they want it for themselves. And I find that so difficult, because many times I want this success for them more than they want it for themselves. And so I'm very excited whenever we have students who come in and they want this college experience for themselves for whatever reasons. They may have been gone for a while and come back. A couple of semesters, a couple of years, 40 years. One of my students has been out 40 years, and he had such a fear of failing again. It's taken him this long to get back. So that's one big thing. We haven't talked about the part of the equation that involves us as instructors, us as support staff, us as lab workers, work-study students who have a willingness and an openness to help these students transition from a different lifestyle that they'd been living a certain way, maybe without computer skills, without needing those computer skills up to this point. And we're all here as a team to help them transition into this lifestyle, this new lifestyle we're calling college. They have a lot of anxiety many times about their own success, which again, piggybacking off what Vicki has to say here. And many times I'm just that sounding board as an instructor and as department head for, let's close the door. What's going on? Tell me. Many of them are wrought with fears, tears, concerns that I can't necessarily help them with, but when I can, I do, and I try to get them to the correct people who can help them with counseling. We can help them to the extent that they can help themselves. But we as an institution are set on putting Project SOAR and things like that into place, giving them advisors and counselors who know what they've gone through, have helped people in this situation already, so that they don't feel alone. I think that's a big key component. We have learning communities here at OSU-OKC. We have these learning communities where students are in courses together, and they go from one course to the next in developmental studies together, so that they get a sense of community. And I've noticed that has a big impact on whether or not a student is successful. They've developed friendships. I'm so excited that at the end of this semester I have students who are going over to advising together, saying, we want to take more classes together. We're having so much fun as a group. We don't want this to end. That connectivity is really making a difference. The connectivity to the instructor, the connectivity to the staff, the connectivity to the other students. And we're noticing a big difference, that we're focusing more on that now. How can we make those connections?
Linda, what factors would you include for positive outcomes?
I think just what they've said, and one thing with the confidence that you mentioned, I think it's imperative that they have some early success. You know, the first couple of weeks, something has to happen that makes that student feel good about being in school. I mean, even if it's a tiny little quiz that they can pass, just anything, pats on the back from the instructor, just anything to make the person feel like, yes, I can do this, and a little confidence to stay. And I think we have to take some barriers out of the way too. I had a girl the first week this semester who didn't show up for the second class, and she told me the next class period that the parking lot was so crowded, and one of the security guys told her to go a different way, and she said, if it's that hard, I'm just not going to come. So little things, like you said, the staff, just little things can get in the way. So just anything we can do to help and to instill that confidence. And then a longer term type thing, I think if we can have shorter semesters, I don't know if you all have experienced this, but the 8-week classes generally do much better than the 16-week classes because there's less chance of all those outside factors interfering. You know, the car won't break down as many times in 8 weeks as it will 16 weeks, and just all those outside factors that influence. So those some things that the college can do or the instructor can do to help, I think, with confidence and just all the logistics, that kind of thing.
Sherry, any other factors?
I agree with everything that was said. The motivation, I think, is huge. And I have, as I mentioned, I only work with single parents. And I have students who are up at 4:30 to get their kids to the bus stop for a 5:30 bus so that they can go to daycare, drop off their kids, get back on the bus to head downtown to switch buses to get to me for an 8 o'clock class and do that whole thing in reverse at the end. Don't tell me that they're not motivated. But they are in a survival mode covering all the things that you've already mentioned, and that tyranny of the moment, because I have to make decisions to survive over the next 12 hours, it makes it more and more difficult for them, and just giving that a passing nod isn't enough. The people who are working with the student actually have to honor the fact where they are, and it doesn't make them less than. It actually makes them, as you mentioned, I don't know that if I could have done that. So to honor how hard this is and their dedication, I think is a great big factor. I also get students that have a lot of vibrato coming in, but the reality is their self-esteem is very low. So the more I can yay you and positive reinforcement, the better.
Sherry, moving into your teaching experience with these students, what do you wish you would have known before teaching developmental students?
Well, this is actually my third career. I'm a baby boomer who, you know, how the careers keep changing. And right before this, I was teaching in a corporate environment. And I thought, okay, great. So now I'm just going to move all this training experience into this classroom. And it's an entirely different world. I'm working with people who, for the most part, are in that lower socioeconomic culture. And I didn't know what that culture was. I didn't know what was important to them. I didn't know that they didn't know. An example would be a student that blocked my way getting out of the elevator because she didn't know to step aside, that people exit the elevator before everybody else gets in. And because of the culture in which she lived, she thought I was being rude to her because I started walking directly toward her, and she stopped and made me go around her to let me know, you don't disrespect me like that. Because I had relationship with my students, they were able to bring that back into the classroom and actually discuss that with me. And the other students let her know, don't you know you step aside? No, she didn't know that. It's not, but she knows a lot of things I don't know. She knows how to survive in an environment I don't know how to survive in. So just even being able to talk about that you have a lot of great knowledge and it helps you survive where you are, but there's a lot of other cultural knowledge we need to bring you. And so, yeah, that to me helps the positive outcomes when they are honored for where they are, and just let them know, but we need to give you some more information to survive and have positive outcomes.
Linda, what do you wish you would have known before teaching developmental students?
I think one thing I wish I had known is that students who have some kind of learning disability or just problem learning are really trying. I think so many instructors, especially in college, think that a student who has a more difficult time is just lazy and is not putting all of his or her effort into it. I know when I started teaching, I didn't realize how low some students could be until I started teaching college. Then I really had my eyes open. And since I've worked with so many students with learning disabilities, and since I have a child of my own who has difficulty learning, I know that that type of student has to put twice, 3 times, 4 times as much effort into it. I've had students who will say to me, "Why is this so hard for me? I do twice as much as she does," or "I do 3 times as much," and I keep rewriting and rewriting, and I just say, you know, it's more difficult for you, but you have to stay with it and you will succeed. And I didn't know that. I think most instructors were good students themselves, and that's why we went into teaching. And we sometimes don't have the empathy for students who have trouble learning until we're exposed to it a lot. And I wish I had known. I don't think I ever made a student feel bad about having a learning problem, but I just wish I had known how difficult it is for students, on top of all those other issues they're dealing with, to have the learning problem too. It's hard.
Jennifer, what do you wish you would have known?
I feel like I could have the Christmas wish list right now, the Santa Claus list come out. First, I like to say I'm learning every day, that's an important part of being an instructor to me. I learn every single day from my students. I learn just as much from them as they learn from me. So this list will keep growing, I'm sure. But one of the things I'd like to really get across is that professors, especially in this area, I feel like need to build in flexibility. Mm-hmm. And that way, from the beginning, a professor feels like, okay, I have these expectations, but these are my built-in flexibilities for when the car won't start, for when the babies are sick. Most professors, as you say, were good students. I wanted to have 100% of my students. I was joking with Vicki earlier this morning. I wanted to be the Robin Williams, the female Robin Williams character in Dead Poets Society. I was pretty sure if I just read them some Emerson and Thoreau that they would become mine and love English forever. I don't want to take away from that younger version of myself and take away from that enthusiasm. I'm still a very enthusiastic instructor. But I think it's more important that I have concentrated now on the successes I do have, and I don't let the days where the students are having issues and all that, I don't let them get to me anymore. I focus on the successes, and I don't feel bad as an instructor anymore about when my students have to drop out for whatever reasons, or because in developmental studies we're trying to do what we can to raise these retention rates to get more students to stay. But the truth is, right now, it's about half of our students we lose. And I feel like I'm losing myself whenever that happens many times. I can't focus there, though. I can't stay there. I have to focus on the ones we are having success with and we're keeping in order to keep my motivation as an instructor.
Vicki, what would you add to the list?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think that when a developmental student comes to us, particularly one with a family and a job or 2 jobs, the ice that student is skating on is quite thin, and it doesn't take a lot sometimes for them to fall through. And school is often the thing that has to go. It's not what I'm glad that I know now, but I did not know then. I wish I had known it when I first started. It's not always about the instructor when a student drops out. It's because they don't have access to good preventative health care, And what could have been fixed 3 weeks ago with a visit to the doctor's office has now they're in the hospital, or what, big things erupt from things that would be small to us in many cases. As I say, they're skating on very, very thin ice, and it's just not always about the instructor when we lose one. I've been in email contact just this morning with a student for whom she was in English 0123 last summer, had to drop out. She was in my English 0123 this semester, had to drop out. She has signed up for my spring, and she's emailing me, and she's excited about coming back. And this kind of stick-to-itiveness they are famous for. They're very stubborn, but it's not about the school always. It's not about the teacher or the subject matter when they have to leave. They just have to step out and deal with things they may or may not ever get to step back in. But often they leave us with goodwill. They just have to leave.
Go ahead.
Could
Sure.
I add something on what I wish I'd known? Being a baby boomer, I really thought that everyone thought like I did. So that generational piece and understanding the difference in the culture of generations being different, I have no concept of why cell phones are so important to their lives, but apparently they are. And just little things like that, but how they view working together, or how, where their motivation is. So studies in that generational culture difference has really helped me. And then there's a lot of books out there on that socioeconomic difference, that it is a different culture. I really like the work from Dr. Ruby Payne. She has several books out, but there are a lot of good resources out there, but that has helped me. I would have studied a culture before I went to teach in Japan, or before I would go to teach somewhere else. I didn't realize I was stepping into a different culture. And once I learned that and could honor it and help them understand the culture of school, which will help them succeed in their culture of work, we can now exchange information cross-culture, and that has helped me, I think, more than anything.
Linda, these are obviously very special students that we are working with, but what characteristics of an instructor do you think works best with these students?
Well, I think we've heard a lot of them here. I have to hire the adjuncts at our school because I'm the coordinator for the developmental studies, and I am never as concerned about the academic background of a person, as much concerned about that as I am the personality. I look for people who are able to nurture and be supportive, people who, this sounds like a contradiction, but we need structure and flexibility, like you said, at the same time, because developmental students want structure. You can't just let them go on their own. They want the structure, but you have to be flexible enough to change up the lesson plan when it's not going well, and to be flexible enough to not take off all the points when the car doesn't work that day. So I just look for people who are enthusiastic and caring, non-judgmental, all those adjectives, just people who care about other people.
Sherry, would you add to that list?
Sense of humor.
Yeah, definitely.
And being able to laugh at myself with the students, to let them know that I'm not stiff and serious. Because when I'm love to learn, I'm very serious about it. I love to learn. But I've had to learn to lighten up a lot. So it makes it better for everybody.
Jennifer, characteristics that you look for?
Wow. I definitely would say enthusiasm is big with me, because there are going to be some tough times. And I had a professor in college who would always say, just keep plugging it. And as much as I, at the time, resented this professor because I wasn't getting the A that I wanted, those words have echoed in my ears over the years being in this field. Just keep plugging it every day. I'm just one day at a time, and to have that kind of mentality, I think is is very good. I think instructors also need to have empathy, to put themselves in someone else's shoes is actually a learned behavior. And I have learned that over the years with my students, and I actually teach them empathy in different ways. One of the ways I do that is they play teacher. They, many times after I teach something, get up and then teach it back to me so that I know that that exchange is going on, so that I can check and see if I'm saying what I wanted them to hear and if they're hearing what I said. I think if you have an enthusiastic professor who has some flexibility, a good sense of humor, all of those things, and just on your toes, ready for anything. And these students have thrown everything my way. I'm never bored. I love that. It's exciting to me. Every day I just think, what's going to happen? Who's going to say what? What are we going to learn today?
Vicki, would you have any characteristics to add?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I especially like that you brought up that humor has to be a part of it. I teach developmental writing. These people come from their work and their children, and they listen to me expound chapter 29, the comma. And they have to want to be there. And then it gets worse. Chapter 31, the apostrophe. And so I told them, look, I know that apostrophes are not the most exciting things in the world, but if you will just think back to last week and hold in your heart the raw excitement that you felt last week with chapter 29, the comma, we'll get through this together. You know, and that kind of thing, they understand that this is stuff that they have to learn. It's not ice cream and cake, but it's what they need to know. So I think humor is very important. I think it's also extremely important to show respect for the students. I have never once called one of my developmental students by his or her first name. It's not Donnie, it's Mr. Gray, and I'm Mrs. Ashby. I'm not Vicki to them. I don't know where they've come from. I've had people who are used to being called Mr. Gray. I have people who have come from prison and have never been called Mr. Gray. So humor, respect, and I think a basic enthusiasm for the learning process, for every right answer. It's sometimes in class I feel like I'm a cartoon because I get so excited and I want to get them excited about. And it's fun to get excited about silly stuff like a comma because they laugh. Oh, she's crazy, you know, but they like that. It engages them in the process. If they feel that they are accepted and respected, and if the material is broken down in a way such that they can get it and succeed, then they'll be back.
Can I add something real quick? And that just goes back to respecting the differences among the instructors too, because we have such a wide range of instructors that do such a great job in developmental studies. And the students enjoy that each instructor brings something different to the plate. They look for that. There are people in our department like Wayne Brown who are famous for their differences, who tell them the history of math. It becomes a history lesson along with the math lesson. And I don't think that can be stated enough, that when you respect their differences, they respect your differences back, and that becomes that exchange, that important exchange between student and professor of, they know if you want to be there or not. And I can say that you cannot trick especially a developmental studies student into thinking that you want to be there when you don't.
That's true.
Because as we're talking about the socioeconomic background and all of those, how that affects them, they are very, from everything I've studied, very intuitive. They have grown up learning to read body language like no other group. And I've had the unfortunate experience of seeing instructors be placed incorrectly into developmental studies and having those students come to me in private and say, I just don't think this instructor wants to be there. And it's not that that is a bad instructor. It's not that that instructor won't find a place in another area, but it does take a special and different instructor to be successful and want to be a developmental studies instructor.
Right. There are places in education for stern professors, even for mean professors, but that's not developmental studies. Developmental studies professors and instructors, above all, have to be nice people, I think.
And going along with the empathy, though, is not to, part of the respect is not to lower the standards.
Absolutely.
That is not respectful. So yes, we have all of that empathy and all of that help that we offer and all of that great stuff. And at the same time, let them know this is going to be hard and you can do it. And let them actually achieve that. There's no bigger self-esteem builder than achieving something hard.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, I know that it is a complicated process to move developmental students along, but give us a short sketch on the process that takes a student into being self-sufficient and able to take higher level classes.
Well, this is a full circle answer, because what we started out talking about was these organizational skills. One of the things that we really emphasize at OSU-OKC is our student success class, and we have just now moved student success into developmental studies. It hasn't been very long that we've been a department ourselves, and now we've moved student success because we've seen that in order for these students to succeed in math, English, reading, they need some basic skills, organizational skills, tools. They need to be shown how to take notes, how to make schedules, how to allot their time. So that is, to me, the first process. We are hoping to, in the future, get some of those computer skills taken care of along with the success strategy skills in the student success class, because we're finding that we're losing a lot of students to this inability to use a computer the way we're asking them to. Let me stop for a second and say, in 2007, I found these statistics. Only 51% of kids who took the ACT reached the college readiness benchmarks. So it's not surprising at all that we are a really big group on this campus. Right now, developmental studies sees 40% of the students enrolled at OSU-OKC are enrolled in at least one developmental studies class. This isn't a marginalized group. This isn't a few select people. I want to get that across right now because I haven't really talked about that. This is about half of our society. And how we choose to deal with this set of our society right now is very important for our future, for the collegiate future, for the university future. And so what we have at OSU-OKC, in case a student hasn't taken the ACT and reached those benchmarks, is the COMPASS test. All of that to get to this idea. The COMPASS test is how we place our students. If, for example, Miss Ashby, who has taught her developmental students very well, if in the middle of a semester a student wants to come back over to the administration building from the LRC and retake the COMPASS exam, he or she is welcome to do it. And then that student may skip that next class, which would be the basic comp class, and go straight on to Composition 1, a class that will count toward their degree. We want to speed up their process in developmental studies. We want to see them skip some of those steps, because that's an issue right now. Some of them will spend 2 to 3 years just in developmental studies classes before getting to their major or getting to their general ed classes at OSU-OKC. And so that's the process. In the ideal world, we would get them through quickly and as cleanly as possible.
Linda, how does that process work for you?
In much the same way. I'm glad you mentioned the success course, because we found at our school that students who take the orientation course, the success course, 68% of those students are retained, as opposed to, just in the general rate, 34% maybe, which sounds pretty bad. So the success course really helps because it's giving them an orientation to college, it's helping them with the study skills and all those life skills that they need. So I think that's a big factor. But just aside from that, I would say in the developmental reading and writing courses, just brushing up on the skills. For a lot of people who have been out of school or who just didn't pay attention, in high school, I think if they just brush up on the skills, they're ready to get into the real college environment. They've learned how to adapt in the developmental class. They've learned how college works, and then they can move on into the regular courses. I think with reading students, it's a little different. It's more a matter, it's not so much remediating the problem, because you don't catch up in a semester what it's taken 12 years to get behind in. It's more a matter of adapting, just learning how to get by, how to function in college courses and get the most out of your reading, and how to get by without reading so much. But it's really all about adapting to college, I think. I think that's the thing that gets them into the next course and into future success.
Sherry, what would you say about students processing?
I agree with everything that's been said. Some of the examples, I would add another example of what needs to be taught. One thing that I find I have to do over and over again is teach the students how to ask questions. That's something that is just an obvious thing to me. Well, of course you would ask a question. No, some of them come from a background where that could make you vulnerable, so they don't. So it's changing the mindset. Others, it's walking them through that mental process of how you actually formulate a question and then ask it in class. So we spend time on that. And another thing I spend a lot of time on is creating that future picture in their head, that belief in the future that can come from this. I think that moves them further on the path to be able to handle those courses mentally and emotionally, kind of going back to the self-esteem piece.
All right, Vicki, do you want to add anything to the process that moves a student along?
I think these ladies have hit the nail right on the head. They've given a lot of great examples. The one thing that to me is the paramount issue is the student's self-confidence. If we can help that student believe that he or she can succeed, this student will do what he or she has been doing for years and figure out a way through all the junk to come to school and get the grades and move forward in life. I think that we're all very lucky to be able to work with this group of people, and that would be my answer: self-confidence for the student.
All right, well, thank all of you so much for being with us and talking about how to move our developmental students along and make sure that they are successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great being here.
Well, today I know you've heard a lot about teaching developmental students. I know that you have a lot to think about. And so again, we thank our panelists for being here today and giving their wisdom and insight about teaching this very special group of people.